Hey everyone, welcome back to Tivoli Zoo. This is episode 8. No, it's been a few weeks since I've had a video out, but just been busy with some real life stuff, some big life changes. My wife gave birth to our daughter a few weeks ago, so just been getting used to life as new parents, but finally getting into a little bit of a normal routine here and have some time to play the game. So in today's episode, I'm going to focus on trying to finish up this exhibit here. Going through and doing all the detailing work on the borders, hopefully getting into this backstage over here, and for sure finishing up as much as I can in this backstage area. Also that in the next episode we can move on to the coastal exhibit over here. So one thing that I realized with the Baobab experience was that, and I still think it's so awesome that they come all the way up here and utilize this. But one thing I noticed was, or thought of after the fact, was that this wasn't ADA compliant. There was no wheelchair ramp or anything for people to go, up to here and then up to the other parts of the experience. And so I decided, since this would be an artificial tree, it would have the support structure necessary to support all of this, that it could also facilitate some elevators. So put in some very rudimentary elevator system in here. So now someone who is disabled would be able to access all 3 levels of this experience for themselves. So really happy with how that turned out here. The one area that they wouldn't be able to get to is this pavilion right here, just because of the steps down, but they could come on this bridge and see into the exhibit. And then I think most importantly is being able to access this up here, because I think that would really be the showstopper for most people, is coming up to this area here and then being able to get over into the exhibit over here. So those are the little things where, as I'm building and as I'm working, I'm kind of realizing, mistakes that are made or things that don't make sense logistically, and that means going back and redoing some work and fixing some things. And so one of those that I'm going to work on now is just sort of the infrastructure of this area back here. So realistically, I need to figure out a way to connect this main yard here with all 3 of these barns, where they wouldn't necessarily have to tie the animal up to a rope and lead them into these barns. They would just be able to sort of corral them into a pen here, and then they'd have access to the barn. Same with these 2 over here. So this is just sort of the trial and error of how I've been building this zoo. And it's people who actually design these things in real life, they've made these mistakes in the past, and so when they design something new, they know all those kinds of things to account for. But in the last video, someone made a comment that we really needed to have a way of doing that, and so that's what I'm going to work on here. I think I'm going to put in another gate here. I'm probably going to move this giraffe barn over here just so that it doesn't pop up too much behind this building here. I do want it to be somewhat hidden. I know zoos generally don't care that much about that kind of thing, but in this area in particular, I don't want a huge distraction from this building. So I'm going to move this over here, relocate some of these barns, and then hopefully work on some fencing and stuff where really all the keepers would have to do is kind of corral animals into one of these pens here and then get them into the barns from there. Making some progress on finally giving this more logistical realism, I think. So as you can see, I've added another gate here. This one was there before, but what it does, as you can see now, I've got some pens back here. Again, all this would do is allow them to sort of corral the animals into this here, and this is a separate area for the giraffes. I'm going to be putting in a gate here so that really, they could, if they needed to, they could move equipment from over here into this area, into the pen, or, into this area here. So there'll be a gate here where they could move heavy equipment in, because there's a lot of like erosion stuff they have to do. So bringing in sand and dirt. That's one thing I noticed from the satellite image of of the Denver Zoo is they've got, especially back in this area, which I'll add it eventually, but they've got a bunch of like front end loaders that you can tell there's just a stockpile of sand and dirt, a lot like we have that I'm going to put over here. So yeah, just trying to make this realistic from a functional standpoint. So right now, the reason for these heavier fences is that I've got like water buffalo in here. You know, there's some larger animals in this exhibit, and in order to not restrict which pen you might want to put them in, obviously the giraffes have to go in here, but I wanted it to be functional from a standpoint that you know, the fencing would support really any animal they wanted to put into this pen. I'm hoping we get African rhinos at some point, which I would put in here as well. I think they're listed as one of the species on the Denver Zoo master plan that would be in consideration for this exhibit. So just those larger animals where, you know, a fence like this wouldn't necessarily hold up. I wanted to make sure this supported those species. So anyway, just moved, like I said, rearranged this. I've added some ductwork. I actually looked at the Columbus Zoo, their Google satellite view, and they had these huge air conditioning units on the ground here next to their barns, and then just this ductwork that goes up into the barns and facilitates, you know, taking care of the animals that way, making sure that their climate is appropriate. And I would imagine that they could also heat them a bit in the winter time, especially being in Colorado. You know, they would absolutely have times where they need to put all the animals in a barn. So the other thing that I want to figure out how to do is separate these two things into two different exhibits, because I want there to be a keeper entrance over here where they can access this yard, just because the keepers in the game are kind of stupid. I've turned off animal welfare because it's all of these animals, even though it says in the game that they get a boost or whatever from having some of these other animals in their habitat, they all have different terrain requirements and different plant requirements. So all of them right now are pretty unhappy with where the terrain is. But the thing is, in a climate like Colorado, it would be very difficult to grow grass and keep it growing with all of these large animals trampling all over it. So there's going to be a lot of dirt in these things, which creates another problem. I need to figure out how to ensure that erosion isn't a huge issue. So I need to put in a lot more of these sort of permanent concrete erosion barriers, and I've started to line the outline of this water here, and I'll be putting in like a permanent floor here so that they don't deal with erosion into this pond. And the same for the river. It needs to have concrete underneath, so for just evaporation and also or not evaporation, absorption into the soil, and then also just erosion of sediments. So anyway, back to the keepers. They're kind of dumb and they struggle to feed these animals. So what happens, the way the game works, as far as I can tell, is when these animals need to be fed, instead of multiple keepers who are assigned to the exhibit feeding the animals, it's like one keeper will come in and fill all of these feeding things. So about every, month or so in the game, all of these animals almost starve to death. So I need to figure out a way to get two exhibits in here where they can all use the same yard. So I think if I use a null barrier, I can outline this entire exhibit and then have another door over here, where theoretically the two keepers can access the entire thing, and then I'll assign some of these feeders to the second exhibit, and then hopefully I'll have two keepers feeding all the animals instead of just one, and cleaning the exhibit and all that stuff. So the other thing that I started working on is a better way for all of the peeps to see the animals over here. So I've got kind of a second watering hole, and this is not something that's in the master plan. It's just something that I thought would be a cool feature. So I started adding that in, especially because if you go down to this area here, you can see if I didn't have an elevated viewing area, it would be pretty difficult to see into the exhibit and see the animals. So I know that this path is, I'm sure that when it comes time to actually do this at the Denver Zoo, all of this will get repaved and regraded and all that stuff. But right now it's an existing path, and it does kind of undulate like this. And so with that in mind and where the elevations are inside this exhibit here, I just thought it made sense to do this. One thing that I am going to change, I think I'm going to delete this little pop out here just because they get a little too close to the animals and I need to figure out this fencing, and I just think it'll be easier if it's one long walkway where they can kind of observe into the exhibit. And then one other really random thing, so someone commented in the last episode that these termite mounds in the wild, they actually point north-south. So that's something I'm going to change too, is I need to go in and make sure all these mounds point north-south, even though they're not real. That's a pretty cool thing that exists in nature, so I want to reflect it here. And then looking at the master plan, there's like these planters and stuff that are kind of used as retaining walls and also barriers for the exhibit and the pathway. So I've got some of those here that I've mixed around, and then wanted to have some regular fencing in there too. And I tried to use some of these barrier fences along with this because a lot of the fencing in zoos I found, it's kind of got wood fencing or wood railings, and then it's got that mesh sort of interwoven in between them. So I tried to sell that look here. And then the other noticeable change, I think, is these very large trees. So in the master plan, it calls for there's like I can't remember what they call it exactly, but it's like a canopy trail here where they're going to keep a lot of the legacy trees and then they're going to try to mix in new tree plantings just to make sure that as some of these trees get older and die, that there's younger trees that are coming up to replace them. But the Denver Zoo has marked out in that master plan some of the large legacy trees that are meant to be saved and meant to be preserved even as they change these exhibits. So I wanted to reflect that here and put these trees in. Looking at the street view inside the Denver Zoo, these trees, they kind of sell what I'm looking at. They probably don't have trunks this tall and canopies that large, but it's certainly getting down low here. It certainly feels more like what I've experienced walking around the Denver Zoo, where there are these very large mature trees. And then coming in through here, where you're going to have the braided path, there will be some legacy trees like this one, some of these, and I don't know what Mike will end up doing when he takes the file, but there will be some legacy trees and there will be a lot of new plantings as well. But this path in particular that loops around, so it'll come over here and loop around, this whole section here will have a lot of older trees that have been preserved in the zoo. I almost forgot to show this off here. So in the last episode, a ton of great feedback and comments, so I really appreciate that stuff. Just sometimes I may not implement what someone suggests, but in the last episode in particular, a lot of great suggestions, and one of them was from Blue Spirit talking about this land bridge here, and how it felt kind of off. It didn't really feel like a cohesive part of the exhibit, and so it got me thinking about ways that I could execute that and make it more. Sorry, oh geez, I think I've got an issue going on with that habitat where the animals are getting stuck there. But anyway, so ways that I could make this more. I'm just gonna pause it because everyone's freaking out. Ways that I could make this more cohesive and a part of the overall exhibit, because in the master plan it does talk about having smaller exhibits where you really get a sense of the entire ecosystem of the savanna, and part of that is obviously things like insects and snakes and things like that. So I wish we had a larger variety of insects in the game. So right now these are just full of basically the same two types of insects that are actually a part of the region of Africa where savanna would be. So unfortunately there's not a lot of variety, but I tried to make it look like it was just like a natural tunnel. So you've got some roots sticking down here, and wanted to make it look like this was kind of carved out of the soil for these exhibits here. And then one thing too, these amazing signs I added, I can't remember who. Yes, these are them. So these are from, I want to make sure to give credit here. These are from a user Bonk0021. So I'll include a link in the description below, but there's a lot of these little types of signs in the game here, or on the workshop, that are really, really nice. I mean, I wish we had more of the frontier ones, but a lot of people are stepping up and creating some really incredible little features and signs that just add to the realism of these exhibits. So thank you for everyone who's creating that kind of stuff, because it makes a huge difference. So I've got some insects in there, and I don't think I'm going to do this same thing on the other bridge. This one I'll probably just make more simple, but looking at some of the reference images, or the concept art, I should say, of this bridge, they really do show it as just looking sort of like a natural piece of land that is a bridge here, instead of something that's more ornate and decorative, like I had going on over here. So I'm really pleased with how this turned out. Now, instead of just something being a walkway or pass through, it really is a part of the exhibit now, and it feels much less kind of claustrophobic and enclosed down there. So yeah, thank you again for all of the fantastic comments and suggestions. I really do appreciate it, because sometimes when you're working on these things, you don't always see some of the blind spots that you're starting to develop. So I think this backstage area is kind of in its final form here. I'm sure there's additional things I can tweak and add additional details, but I'm pretty happy with how it's looking here. I've got some shovels in these dirt piles, and I really hope that we get more pieces in an upcoming update, or even more of like these kinds of things, these Jeeps. Just because it would be nice to have like some front end loaders and stuff. I know that's probably not going to happen, and they're not going to waste their time on that, but someone who's gifted with the art shapes and the pieces, it would be awesome if we had some equipment like that. That's really the only thing this area is missing, I think. But it functions realistically now, I think, and logically. So you've got this gate here that opens, and then you could get heavy equipment into this yard here from the backstage. This gate here separates these two barns, where if you left this door open, animals could access out here and out here. I also added, I took away some pens here, so there's no pen here, and I'll put in like benches and things like that for the keepers to utilize. But I realized that they would have to walk all the way around and into the door back here to get into these barns, and so now there's a much easier way for them to get in and out of these barns, and not have to necessarily walk all the way around. Added another gate here where they could load animals onto like livestock trailers if they needed to move them anywhere, and also easier access into the animal hospital if they needed to do that as well. So really happy with how this all turned out back here. Still need to obviously add lots more detail work and more in here, but I've kind of started to do that with the parking here for the animal hospital. And something I referenced in the last episode was the stairs that were right here, and right here, that there was nothing stopping just anyone from coming in and out of the zoo and not utilizing the main entrance here. So what I'm going to do is put in something here for like a group entrance where schools and other types of groups would utilize the entrance here and avoid clogging up this main entrance. But as you can see, I took out these stairs here. As much as I loved them and thought they looked great, I couldn't think of a better way to prevent people from just utilizing those stairs to get into the zoo without doing something really ugly. Or something that didn't make sense, since this is a newer sort of master planned thing. So we'll have a gate across here for staff and deliveries and things like that. And now only people who are part of the zoo will be able to utilize this area here. And then just again, doing some more detailing, putting in parking lots or parking spaces for all of the staff. We'll probably continue this in some areas around here, although I want to keep this fairly open for like trucks and just all the animals and things like that. But this backstage area stretches almost the entire length of the zoo, kind of down into here, and then there's this is where the primate exhibits will be. So we've still got plenty of room to go this way, and there will be more barns and more facilities and things like that. But I'm kind of at a point here where I can't really go any further because I need to flesh this area out before I keep going. But overall, really, really pleased with how it's coming together. Tied up the details here. Still need to do the same for this area, which I'm going to focus on working out this backstage area here, and then just cleaning up all of this before we get into the next episode. And then also, like I said, want to work on fixing this building up a little bit more and making it more functional and realistic, the same way that I have that backstage area over there. Okay, so I think all of this is pretty much tidied up now. Got this backstage looking much more realistic. If you remember before, I had the power generator and one of the water treatment things back here, but since they turned off those requirements for Sandbox, I decided to just ditch them and then add a bunch of this junk in here, which this stuff is, again, courtesy of Mr. Gomez. This is a new set that he has out, which is really useful for just kind of cluttering up these backstage areas. So I will make sure to include a link of that in the description of the video. And then again, these are his amazing trash bins and recycling bin, which really just helps sell the realism of the backstage. So I've got a ramp in here that could be utilized for groups, and then more likely staff that would use it to get into the zoo, which I need to put in a more formal gate right here, which I'll do. But now all of this should be pretty well sealed off from the general public, and they wouldn't be able to just get into the zoo that way anymore. Pretty much wrapped up the perimeter of this exhibit. I've got multiple layers of fencing now and these ditches here, so I don't think we have near the problems of animals escaping like I did before. I still needed to tweak it and fine tune it. Like, this is all just temporary because I have to figure out how I'm going to make this backstage area function. But I'm really pleased with just the general look and feel of the perimeter of this exhibit here. It feels to me like it reminds me of walking around the Denver Zoo in my childhood, especially with these big, huge, tall trees. And then same thing with this area over here, multiple layers of fencing, just to make sure animals don't escape. And then tidied up this area so that it feels much more fleshed out and finished than it did before. But looking at this backstage and the Denver Zoo master plan, it looks like there's two fairly large barns here, and it says that there's an indoor viewing area, which I have not figured out how I'm going to make that function and work, because there's this elevation change due to the land bridge. So I'm not sure if I need to bring this down more, and that's how they made it work. I'm kind of puzzled, honestly, and probably not going to get to it in this episode because of that reason. Also, I need to sort of define this edge here, because on the other side of this path, as it goes this way, will be the Indian elephant exhibit. So a little bit stuck on this, but it did encourage me to keep working on this backstage for the Predator Ridge. Huge shout out to one of my viewers, Ethan. He actually interned at the Denver Zoo this last summer, and he was kind enough to share some insights and some pictures of some of these backstage areas with me, and just kind of show me the stuff that they have in these keeper huts and in these keeper buildings. I shouldn't say huts, they don't have huts in real life, but these keeper buildings. So sent him some satellite images, and he showed me there was two there's these 2 storage yards or containment yards for the animals, and I think those are likely used for rotating the different predators that are here. If you remember from one of my earlier episodes, when this was finished, it was really cutting edge because it was designed where they could rotate the animals. So African wild dogs, hyenas, and lions between 3 different yards here. So now that I've got these pens in, it's helping me to sort of figure out how I'm going to make it function logistically. So if we go inside here, you can see what I'm talking about. So I need to figure out a way for them to be able to move the animals from this exhibit into this exhibit into this smaller exhibit here. So I think I'm going to try to put in like a tunnel and door system, or at least a door system where it's fenced off from the keepers, and then the rest of this will just be sort of functional for the keepers, from like preparing food, or something that he showed me that was something completely unexpected was a washer and dryer. That's something I never would have thought would be in a backstage area of the zoo, but it was in his pick. So that's the kind of stuff that I'm going to add into this area over here. And then also need to fix the pathing because I'm getting guests that are coming back here now. So that's probably going to be the remainder of the episode, is tidying that up. And then like I said, in the next episode, we'll be moving on to the coastal exhibit. Okay, so I think I'm at a good stopping point for this episode, and a good spot with this Predator Ridge exhibit and the backstage. So again, big thank you to Ethan for all of the information and the help. So I think I finally got to a point here where all of this should function now, where the animals could be rotated between all of these exhibits. So we've got a pen here, door access, and then door access. So if we start here, you can see into the cheetah exhibit. We've got all these drains. That's one thing he pointed out to me, was that there's like drains everywhere in these backstage areas of the zoo, just for cleanliness and making sure there was plenty of access for water and hoses to keep these exhibits and the habitats clean, just making life on the keepers as easy as possible. Then we've got some ductwork in here to either provide air conditioning or more likely heat in the wintertime. And one thing I noticed of the Google Earth view of the Predator Ridge is they have all these skylights into these holding areas, so that in the event that they need to keep the animals indoors in the wintertime, they still have access to sunlight. One thing I need to put in here is like a garage door type thing similar to this. Realistically, this opening should be more like this is, but the problem with that is based on kind of the hit boxes of the scenery pieces and the animals and the staff. If I put one of these in, then the staff and the animals won't be able to get out into the main yard. So I'll put something in that makes it look like it kind of opens and closes like that. That's really the only thing left to do here. But if we look at how this functions now, so we've got a door here where they could rotate animals through this area. Then they've got an enclosure here, and then into where the lions are. So again, more drains, and this is a much larger sort of shelter area for the lions, and again, skylights for them during the wintertime. And then these doors can be utilized to access this smaller yard here. So the other area is across. So there's a door into where the cheetahs are right now. And then this door goes out into this pen right here. So what we have basically is now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different areas that are all interconnected with these doors and these tunnel systems where the animals could be rotated, and you could put any animal in here and then rotate the animals in this yard and move them in there, and then take these guys and move them into here, or really any combination. So even though they won't actually function like that in this game, at least realistically and logically based on the source material, it's a it's feasible at this point. This is not exactly how the Denver Zoo does it. Ethan showed me a really great video that had some really great backstage shots of the Predator Ridge exhibit, and it's much different than what I have here, but in terms of again, just selling realism, I'm happy with how this turned out. So again, some very primitive washer and dryers here, which I was shocked to see as a part of the backstage area for the keepers. Some shelving, some refrigeration system, especially for the predators, keeping meat cool and storing it and all that kind of stuff. And one thing that he really pointed out the importance of was having lots of whiteboards where you could keep notes and take notes on what the animals are eating and how frequently and all that kind of stuff. So all of these are just supposed to be little whiteboards on these fridges with different notes about the different animals, and then same thing up here. And this is where they would prepare some of the food, even though this room has that and this is actually functional. I wanted there to be a much larger sort of food preparation area. And then back here, just have some staff rooms, and then whatever the heck this one is, the service hut or whatever. So yeah, I think all in all, this thing is pretty much wrapped up. Like I said, there's a couple little details I need to fix and add based on the winter time, being able to shut the animals in here completely, where they don't have access to the outdoors. But yeah, really pleased with how this turned out. I might need to tweak the path there so they don't clip through the door or the wall, that they clip through the door instead. But at least this helps me sort of set the stage for this backstage part. I think I'm going to have to do something with the terrain to start bringing it down to this level. And then same thing over here. This will be sort of an access drive onto this path here, where they would be able to accept deliveries and things like that from the perimeter of the zoo, which would be back here. So yeah, that's the next step from this area. But before we get to there, we're going to work on this coastal project over here, which will have polar bears, and then we're going to create the pools and the habitats for, hopefully at some point we get seals or sea lions, and that'll be a part of this exhibit over here. I do have a backup plan in case we don't ever get those, but I am going to make it for the polar bears and the sea lions. And we'll see where the development of the game goes from here. But once we get done with that, again, I'll be passing this off to Mike Sheets for a garden rescue. It'll probably be a 2-part garden rescue for him, honestly, because he's going to be doing the braided path all the way from here to all the way about right here. And then once we've got this area done, I will probably, that'll give us our boundary for this side of the zoo, and then we'll start working our way back around this way, and then eventually, probably a year from now or so, we'll get over to the primate exhibit. But really, really interested to see what DLCs we're going to get next for this game. I think even though we just had that one in right before Christmas, it feels like things are getting a little bit stale. There was a lot of scenery in that one, but a lot of it was like the ice and the snow, which isn't really versatile to use for a lot of different applications. So we'll see what we get coming up here. But if they follow the development timeline that they did with Planet Coaster, I think we'll probably be getting something in March, would be my guess. And hopefully it's a decent one. Hopefully we get a fair amount of scenery pieces and some more animals as well. But really, really happy with how this is all coming together. I think really the only sort of fine tuning I need to do in the Savanna exhibit is just some more erosion abatement stuff with those rock walls here. But just sort of ran out of time for this episode, and we will save that for another day. What will probably end up happening is I'll probably end up doing like a live stream at some point where I just spend time doing all of that kind of stuff, and save it where it's not really in an episode, because it can get a little bit tedious at times. And part of that will also be lighting. I've tried to do as much lighting as I can as I go along, but I definitely need to do sort of a complete pass on everything that I've created so far, and just make sure that it's up to snuff. So anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and for being patient, since it took so long for another episode to come out. I don't think that I'll be able to do an episode every week at this point, but hopefully, at least every couple weeks, and go from there. So anyway, thank you guys again so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode when we work on the coastal exhibit. Thanks guys, have a good one.